from the News Channel 5 network. This is Open Line.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Open Line on a Monday night here on News Channel 5 Plus. Rhori Johnston sitting in the chair tonight. Good to have you with us. Hope you're all staying safe. If you've been watching, you know the remnants of Hurricane Ida the waves are starting to roll in here to Middle Tennessee, and we are under a Storm 5 alert. So be sure to keep tabs on that. But tonight we are talking about another big story. Of course, that is this ongoing repeated waves of COVID-19 and now the Delta variant. We know numbers are back up. So we want to hear from you, and we're going to try to answer some questions. Specifically, our topic is, if you've been reading the headlines, the FDA has fully approved Pfizer's vaccine now. It was under emergency use authorization last week. It gets full FDA approval. And the question is, will that persuade more people now who were hesitant, who said they were taking the wait and see approach, to go out and get the vaccine? We know the numbers here in Tennessee are lower than many other states around the country, and officials everywhere are trying to encourage folks now that we've been this far into the pandemic, and with the vaccine showing that it is safe and effective. So we want your calls and questions, please. And our guest tonight, we want to welcome the Assistant Professor of Infectious Diseases over at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, Aimalohi Ahonkhai. I said it right. Aimalohi Ahonkhai. So good to have you with us. And so tell us, first of all, how long have you been there at Vanderbilt?
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Sure.
I joined faculty at Vanderbilt in 2016. From Boston, where I was on faculty at Mass General.
Okay, great. Well, we're glad you're here in Nashville, and it's a wonderful medical community. And obviously, in your role, you've been watching this with great interest. What was your reaction when the Pfizer vaccine, and I should point out the Moderna vaccine, and then eventually Johnson & Johnson, they've applied as well, I believe, for this full approval and expected to receive it. But the FDA doesn't want to be rushed. They're going to make sure that they're doing everything they can to make sure that these approvals are correct. But what's your reaction to that?
Well, you know, as you mentioned in the beginning, I think all of us in healthcare are quite excited that this formal approval has been issued by the FDA. There are many people who've said, you know, once the FDA says that they formally approved it, that they'll be willing to be vaccinated. But I also think that this is the formal process that we expect to happen. The FDA is such a well-respected entity and organization for ensuring the safety, the efficacy, and the quality of any drug or vaccine that we put into bodies across this country. So it's a very respected organization, and it takes such a rigorous approach to ensuring each of these things. So I think we're all very excited.
What do you say about those who are vaccine hesitant? Even though we know recently, in recent weeks, as we've dealt with this surge of Delta variant cases, we've seen also more people deciding, okay, I'm going to go get vaccinated, which is good. We've seen definitely an uptick in vaccinations, but still not where we need to be. What do you say to those folks who are still hesitant?
Well, I think people are hesitant for a variety of reasons. If it's regarding the speed with which the FDA did issue an emergency use authorization for these vaccines, I think it's important for people to understand what the process looks like, because it is quite a rigorous process. And as I mentioned, there are three key things to keep in mind. One is safety. So just the safety of the drug, the vaccine. In this case, we're talking about COVID-19 vaccines. The second one is the efficacy. So how well does it work to prevent infection, to prevent hospitalization, and to prevent death? And the last thing that's really important that people don't always think or realize is that the FDA also wants to make sure that we have the most rigorous quality in manufacturing vaccines, because of course they have to be distributed across the entire country. Mm-hmm. And so in order to make those determinations, there are a series of very detailed steps that have to be followed. And so once companies like Pfizer, for example, have some promising data about the safety and efficacy of a vaccine, they apply for permission from the FDA to go through this process, even to be issued the EUA or the emergency use authorization. And then they go through several other detailed steps that include further studies to look at safety and dosing and effectiveness before even an EUA can be administered. So I think it's just very important for people to understand that even for the EUA, there were several steps that had to be gone through and checked off by any of the pharmaceutical companies that approached the FDA for this process. And then even more so to get to formal FDA approval.
What is your hope now that the FDA has issued this full approval?
You know, we have administered, I think 175 million people in the United States have been fully vaccinated against this COVID-19. It's more like 5.5 billion worldwide. We have so much data that tells us how safe and effective these vaccines are. And I hope this formal FDA approval for the Pfizer vaccine really does assuage people who had that fear that they can now safely get vaccinated and convince their family, their friends, their community members who are similarly reticent to also get vaccinated.
Yeah, and I'll just read here that the full vaccine approval, it is approved for 2 doses, as we know, 3 weeks apart. This is in people 16 and older. It remains available under emergency use authorization, not full approval, for adolescents 12 to 15. Under 12, still not recommended at this time. There's just not enough research. Eventually, I'm sure that they are already looking into that, and there are trials underway and tests for those under 12. But that is where we are right now with Pfizer. Do we know where we are timeline as far as the other manufacturers, Moderna and Johnson & Johnson?
You know, I'm not sure exactly what the timeline is, but one thing that I think is clear is that the FDA won't be rushed in this process. They will make sure that each of these metrics are met before they provide formal approval. So as you mentioned, they're in the process for each of the other vaccines that have EUAs in the United States. And I'm sure those will come, not too long after this point.
Well, and I've heard people say, you said that the FDA won't be rushed. I mean, this is record time, I believe, for such full approval from what I've read. The vaccine approval was the fastest in the agency's history, coming less than 4 months after Pfizer filed for licensing. That was on May 7th. There's a bioethics expert here who says it's been remarkably fast. But it says here, careful handling of the approval was crucial to potentially persuading the vaccine hesitant to receive the product. She says you can't have it both ways. You can't have people saying they won't get vaccinated until there's full approval and then say the FDA has to hurry up. And also should point out that the manufacturing, development of vaccines, all of this today, if you're going to compare it to maybe a drug 10, 20 years ago, it is going to be perhaps faster because the tools are much smarter. I mean, they really do have the technology is better, right?
I agree. And I think one of the things that scientists and regulatory agencies have learned from this process is that, of course, here, all hands were on deck. Of course, we were in the middle of a global crisis.
Right.
And urgency of now was like no other. So we were working together across all industries, across multiple disciplines, but also some of these steps were being done in parallel. So, and typically they're done sequentially in that orderly fashion, but we recognize that there was an urgency and we had to respond to it.
Right.
But I think in the future, as we move forward from this experience, we've learned what things we may be able to facilitate more quickly in the future in terms of drug development and vaccine development, and making things available to people as they need them critically.
737+ is the phone number to call in if you would like to join the discussion. Does the FDA full approval of the Pfizer vaccine convince you, if you're unvaccinated, to now get the vaccine? That's what we'd like to know tonight. We're going to take our first break and be back with our guest right after this.